When I need to make sense of the world around me and the very interesting world that we're living in, I actually tend to turn to Professor Ken Rogoff's writings, and I have the pleasure of interviewing him right here in Davos. Thanks very much, Professor Rogoff, for being with us. I'm not going to waste too much time about talking about the globe. I'm going to do that later. But I will first speak to you about demonetization, and you've written extensively on this. Almost 2 months over, in fact, over 2 months over, you say this is the curse of cash as far as India is concerned. Do you believe it's over?
Well, they still haven't finished printing all the new currency supply, so I think it's still being felt. I don't know all the considerations that the Prime Minister had, and corruption's a huge problem, and I think many of the problems that he's trying to address are very real. Certainly in term, and I when I've looked at developed economies, I think the problems of large denomination notes, $100, 500 euro, 1,000 Swiss francs, are mostly used in underground economy and for crime. I'm less familiar with the Indian case, but I would say a few things about it. First, it's quite a strong maneuver to do it so fast. My book recommends 5 to 7 years to phase out a currency. Second, it also says probably not such a great idea in developing economies. I only want to get rid of large denomination notes, but you didn't actually have any. Your largest was $15. I know India's a poorer country, but still.
Yes.
And then last, something that's not in my book but didn't even occur to me to write, is it takes 6 months to a year to print a new currency supply. And so you kind of want to have the new currency supply on hand when you're trading it in for the old one.
Just to be the devil's advocate, they believe secrecy had to be maintained. But, to take cues from your answer, eliminating large denomination currency is what you have advocated. 500 and 1,000 was the most traded and obviously the largest denominated currencies. But we, in turn, have actually gone back and reintroduced, and in fact, introduced a 2,000 rupee note. Do you believe that's going to be counterproductive?
I mean, in the context of everything going on, I don't think this is the first order issue. That's still only $30. So it doesn't concern me so much. But yeah, again, the strategy and tactics is very different. There was an economist in the mid-'70s, James Henry, he was chief economist at McKinsey, who advocated doing a really quick turn-in of cash to try to get the criminals, to try to get the tax evaders, as I think the Prime Minister was trying to do. What my concern and why I advocated something quite different in my book was there's a lot of collateral damage. And I understand they wanted to maintain secrecy. It's hard to print the cash in secrecy, but at the same time, you're trying to balance the gain. And I think the long-run gain to trying to find ways to restrict cash are good, but you have to be careful in the short run. He had many good policies, for example, having fees and licenses paid online instead of in cash.
Yeah.
I talk about it in my book, this was a great idea to try to reduce the use of cash, and hopefully there can be more ideas like that.
So you spoke about gradual phasing out, 6 to 7 years. But can a developing economy afford to do what a developed economy do? India is growing at 7%. Could we have done this gradually, you believe?
Well, my book advocates not to do it at all. My book states several times if you're a developing economy, you probably need to wait. Now, I have to say, I've talked to presidents of other countries, not of India, and of emerging markets, and they've said, we're very interested in this idea. Should we do it? And I say, well, 50% of your people are unbanked. This really isn't something for you. And they'll sometimes come back to me and say, you as an American simply don't understand corruption and the level that affects every part of our society. And if we don't fight that, and my answer to that is, look at what India did, not in demonetization, but with its licenses and paying fees online. Look at these other ideas to try to circumvent the corruption.
I'm glad you speak about our efforts to eliminate corruption. The 4 objectives that were given for demonetization was a crackdown on black money, a crackdown on counterfeit currency, crackdown on terror funding, and of course being less cash intensive as an economy and as a financial market. Which of those objectives have been achieved? Because if you actually look at the unofficial numbers that are being reported, the money that has come back to the system is almost the money that was demonetized. So in that sense, has that objective not been achieved at all?
Well, I think because they tried to do it too fast, it forced them to really not look too closely when people brought money back. It put the authorities in a weaker position. But you have to have a long horizon of these things, and there may well be a change in mentality. I think one of the Prime Minister's objective was to reset the mindset of Indian people. And so, it may be that in 3 or 4 years there are beneficial effects we don't see now. I think it could have been done better, but that doesn't mean that there won't be effects in the long run. We don't know after 2 months.
How demonetization is done, we can continue to debate it, but it's an exercise that has ended now. What is it that the government needs to do to remonetize the country right now, get spending back on track? Because we all know consumption has taken a hit. People are keeping their purse strings very tight. What does the government need to do to remonetize India?
Oh, well, very simply, you have to finish printing the cash so that people can pay workers, can pay suppliers, so that's fairly straightforward. And I think, over the long run, the goals of the demonetization, of fighting corruption, of fighting black money, of fighting terror, can be worked on in other ways. If you look at the Europeans, there are restrictions on the size of cash transactions. There are also ways of fixing cash registers so that they record sales. There are many more other ideas which might be applicable over the long run, which could be looked at.
The other part of this entire debate is, of course, the government rushed into this, but I think a lot of people are criticizing of how the RBI handled this. In fact, the unions within the RBI and a lot of employees have now raised public concerns about the RBI's autonomy and its independence being undermined. Is that a concern that you share as well?
Well, I don't know all the details and don't know everything that went on, and so it's hard to comment. My colleague Raghuranjan's, I think, a great central banker, and Governor Patel I've met and very impressed with him. On the other hand, one has to understand that central bank independence is something you always have to fight for every day. The Congress could undermine Federal Reserve independence. It's a big concern of me with Donald Trump coming in of undermining Federal Reserve independence. At some level, if the president or the prime minister wants to do something, you can protest, you can make your case, and I believe the RBI did. But if he just says we're going ahead with this, then there's not that much you can do.
But the criticism also came in from former RBI governors like Y.V. Reddy and other people. Bimal Jalan criticized the move, saying this does harbinge and this does impinge upon the RBI's autonomy. In that sense, do you believe the RBI was found wanting in fighting for its own independence?
Again, there are limits to what you can do. You can make the case. In the United States, if the U.S. Treasury wants to print a $10,000 bill, and the Federal Reserve thinks it's a bad idea, they can have a committee, they can meet with the president, but at the end of the day, if the president says, we're going to have a $10,000 bill and Donald Trump's picture will be on it, there's nothing the Federal Reserve can do. And that's true of really virtually every central bank in the world.
We are perhaps moving into a world where we'll perhaps see a Donald Trump picture on a dollar, but just to talk about the macroeconomics in India, IMF just 2 days back has reduced India's growth target from 7.6 to 6.6% on the back of demonetization. Some people believe growth could be even at levels lower than that. Consumption has taken a hit, and that was the big driver and not investment as far as our growth is concerned. What is your take?
Well, again, I don't really have any inside information. In general, the way a lot of the IMF has portrayed things and other outside agencies is that the hit from demonetization, while painful and not distributed evenly, has not been that bad, and that over time India is doing very well. India is a star performer. You're growing faster than China, and that's likely to continue. So it's important to bear that in mind. This is an economy that's in a good growth period, likely to continue its good growth period. So once things normalize, hopefully things will seem better.
The budget is coming in the backdrop of demonetization. The whole effort will be perhaps to remonetize India, to make things more cashless, to move away from the cash incentives. But what is it that the government needs to do to boost consumption, to boost investments in this budget, in the back of demonetization that has happened?
Well, I think it's just the usual things that India needs to slowly change over time, improving infrastructure, trying to there's certainly room for India to grow in manufacturing jobs and other sectors. So these long-term structural changes, you don't just stop because of a cyclical move or some temporary factor. And India needs to continue to do these things.
On that note, sir, thanks very much for speaking to us. But not before I let you go and not ask you a question on Donald Trump. These are very interesting times that we live in. Nobody thought Britain will exit the European Union and Donald Trump is going to be the president of the United States. How different do you expect America to be under his presidency vis-a-vis Barack Obama's?
Well, Barack Obama, I think, is a very attractive person representing the United States in the world. You can agree with his policies, you can disagree with his policies. There were many trends going against the United States in foreign policy that had nothing to do with Barack Obama. The rise of China, the rise of authoritarianism in Europe and Turkey, Poland, Hungary, which, undermined the U.S., which is sort of a leader of a democratic ideal. Then we're switching to Donald Trump, who, seems more like the representative ugly American. But hopefully, I'm an American. I hope that he does very well. I hope he's viewed as a great president. I'm nervous.
You're nervous because America will be more inward-looking, more populist, more protectionist?
No, actually, what makes me most nervous is just he seems like such a volatile, unpredictable personality, very inexperienced, in charge of the world's greatest power. He has absolutely appointed adults in his cabinet, but the president makes the decisions. Will he listen to them? What will his final decision be? And I'm hoping for the best. What can we do?
We're all hoping for the world and the best as far as the world is concerned under Donald Trump. But thanks very much, sir, for being with us. That's Kenneth Rogoff in conversation with us right here at ET Now.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.